Hello everyone, I'm going to walk you through a metabolism drawing that will be a supplement to your PowerPoint. So I'll try to make this as easy and quick as possible. So just to orient you, this is a cell. You have the cytoplasm here, you've got a mitochondria over here, my favorite. And then right along the cells are capillaries, where we have all the blood sugar we've been talking about all year. We've got fats, we've got ketones. All three of these can be used for energy, which is what we're talking about when we talk about metabolism. And we're also going to go over the theory of aging that you read about in those chapters. So in general, sugar, fats, and ketones can all get into the cytoplasm. There's different transport systems, but you don't need to know those or for the time being, or for this class at all, actually. Sugar is broken down via glycolysis, and this was in the Khan Academy videos you watched. The end product is pyruvate. Fats and ketones go all the way into the mitochondria and are further broken down there into what's called acetyl-CoA. And that's also mentioned in your video. It's just a 2-carbon molecule that can then be broken down further. Everything eventually gets to acetyl-CoA, actually. Glucose. Thank you, videographer. Glucose can be taken from pyruvate into acetyl-CoA. Basically, you can't get into the mitochondria unless you're in the form of acetyl-CoA. Let's see. So sugar is broken down via glycolysis, fats broken down, and ketones both to acetyl-CoA. Everything ends up as acetyl-CoA. I am going to come back to sugar when I talk about cancer, but we'll leave it. This is just like normal metabolism right now. Once you're in acetyl-CoA, this can go into what's called the Krebs cycle, also mentioned in the videos you had. The main job of the Krebs cycle is to generate electron transporters, which are mainly in the form of what's called NADH. And every acetyl-CoA that goes through here generates a set of NADH. These NADH then go over to the electron transport chain. So this chain, just like you saw in the videos, is along kind of the inner mitochondrial membrane. And there's tons of them. There's thousands, millions, and then there's millions of mitochondria in the cells. And so just keep in mind this is one example. And there's tons of chains along the whole cristae. When the electrons are dropped off, they flow through this chain. That flow causes, where's my green? Should keep all the colors. The flow of the electron has a purpose. Basically, it's an electrical current. And what that does is cause these, what are called cytochromes, to pump the hydrogen from the inside of the mitochondria to this intermitochondrial membrane space. So you have a bunch of hydrogen up here building up and none down here. That creates a concentration gradient, so you basically be able to create energy out of essentially not much by creating this concentration gradient. When you do that, the hydrogen have to then, they want to flow back through, but the only way they can get back and even back out is through this relatively large, as far as scale, enzyme. So they're all flowing down here happily. This is the ATP synthase enzyme that was discussed in the videos. And what this does is when the hydrogen flow through, this causes the enzyme to, what's theorized, is spin and take an ADP, the components of ATP, and put them into ATP. All you really need to know is that it generates a bunch of ATP, which is the energy source for everything in your body. And that's how the majority of ATP is made, by this process. It's relatively complex. There's a lot of steps to the Krebs cycle. There's a lot more steps within here, but the overall picture is this. As far as the aging chapter, and you read about free radicals, the place that free radicals are mostly created is actually in this electron transport chain, what can happen is the electrons can leak out early, which is not ideal. And so what should normally happen, the electrons flow all the way through, as you saw, and those electrons will then take some of these hydrogen and the oxygen, and together they will break off and make H2O, so water, as long as there's hydrogen and oxygen around. But over here, there's not hydrogen available. So because of that, you can't make H2O. The electrons just tend to react with oxygen, creating oxygens that have lost an electron. So that's what's considered a free radical. There's different types, but in general, this is where that happens. The purpose of these free radicals, which most people think of free radicals and that they're just bad, but they actually do have a purpose. Inside each of your mitochondria, you actually have strands of DNA, just like you have in the overall cell and the nucleus. The difference is this DNA is just like hanging out here, and it's able to make changes pretty readily. It's not inside a nucleus, tucked inside a chromosome. The purpose of these free radicals is to go here and tell your mitochondrial DNA that there is a leak, it needs to be repaired. Potentially this actually generates or causes this DNA to create even more mitochondria. So this creates adaptation. So there is an actual purpose to these free radicals, just like everything in your body. But like most things we've talked about, if you have too much of something, that's when there's a problem. So if you have too many of these free radicals and not enough time to actually repair, as in you just keep making them and making them and making them, these free radicals can actually start to break down the mitochondrial walls. Things can start leaking out. It's theorized that those same free radicals can then go damage your actual DNA in your nucleus. So that's a big issue, as in we would not want too many of these. So they have a purpose, but you don't want to have too much buildup. So the idea about aging is that over time, there's more and more free radicals building up, there's more and more damage happening to the mitochondria, and then, as you also saw in part of your video, the mitochondria is mainly what's in charge of programmed cell death. So if the mitochondria is damaged enough from these free radicals, it will actually pop off one of these pieces of the electron transport chain, that was the cytochrome C, and it will tell the cell that it's time to die. So it's kind of like self-sacrifice. Just totally double checking, videographer, that your finger is not blocking any of the view, correct? Super close.
I mean, it didn't look like it.
Great. I'm gonna have to write those subtitles in, don't you worry. I'd be real mad if that was happening the whole time. So this would signal cell death. It's not as though if there was one damaged mitochondria, the cell's just gonna die. You have to build up a certain number of, like a tipping point of mitochondrial damage, and then the cell will die. And once that happens, basically you start to degenerate your tissues because your cell will start to die off. And that's aging, progressive, slow cell death via the buildup of free radicals. Just kind of look from the videographer. It's horrifying, I know. So that's essentially the theory. How do you keep this from happening? This is one of the, and we're going to talk about this, but this is one of the main reasons that calorie restriction and intermittent fasting is so helpful, is that because you are actually finally giving a break to these electron flow, because you're not shoving electrons through, you can actually give your mitochondrial DNA time to repair, rest and repair. So you want to have enough time in between energy intake. If you're constantly intaking energy, you don't really have this happening, or the breaks to happen. And then you just keep building up damage, and then you progressively, or you age faster, essentially. The other thing that to keep in mind is that the more mitochondria you have, the better off you'll be, the more places you have to put energy. And what gives you more mitochondria? Exercise, because it's awesome. So, let's see. Quickly, as a finishing point, we're going to talk about cancer. We're just going to lump that all together, because I'm not coming back here to redo these videos. You never know what's going on. So cancer, as you're going to read, it's thought of mainly as a genetic mutation disorder or disease that's buildup of genetic mutations, but the question is what causes those genetic mutations, and one of the things that you actually hear in your video is that free radicals is something that causes, I'll be done soon, causes genetic mutations. So the buildup of free radicals in general could cause genetic mutations. The other thing that is discovered about cancer is that cancer cells feed heavily on sugar, which is also just glucose. Because of that, what tends to happen is, you saw this option that it can go to acetyl-CoA. If you're munching down a lot of sugar and there's like, this is full, mitochondria's like, we're busy here, there is another option. This can basically spin off as lactate, which is very close to lactic acid. And lactate can also damage the cell, so if you have a cell that's relying heavily on the breakdown of carbs, it's likely you're going to be building up a lot of lactate in that cell too, which is also damaging. So both things not good, which is part of the metabolic theory of cancer and why it's bad. I feel like there's a lot more I should say in this limited amount of time, but I think that's where we're going to leave it. I'll answer your questions online and everything